Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So let's just go straight forward to the presentation. I think so. Can people hear me? Yes, no? Yes. It says I'm talking, so it's okay. So this is just copy paste from the goal of the Wellbeing Initiative. Was to increase knowledge and understanding of a set of complex, iterated, and systemic problems affecting the well-being of humans. Identify innovative interdisciplinary solutions. So this was one of the reasons why we decided to apply, because we think we fit in this description. And so that's why we presented BYMBOS, which had the aim to increase our knowledge of the interrelationship among stress, breathing, and posture that affect well-being of humans. This was a 2-year project, and so we got funded for the 20,000 euro. And the project is already over, so now we are analyzing the data, and I'm going to present what we have obtained. The point of the project is that modern society is suffering from modern pathology that medicine can only partially address. There are several pathologies that were always related to aging, and that now are appearing earlier and earlier in life, even in adolescents or kids. And these pathologies can be back pain, neck pain, or even arthrosis. Someone is typing in the chat. We cannot see the slide, they say. This one. Yeah. No? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So these are kind of pathologies, especially arthrosis, that should not appear in adolescents at all, but they are appearing in numbers that are really worrying. The only rationale identified up to now seems to be stress. So stress theoretically can modify posture, and a bad posture can induce musculoskeletal problem. Here I'm citing quite an important paper from Deep and Matt, published in Pediatrics in 2006, where more than 3,000 school children, so we're talking about 12, 16 years old, shown to have quite warning percentage of musculoskeletal problem. Neck, shoulder pain, low back pain, arm pain. These are kids. I mean, this percentage should be 0. So we are talking somehow about this body-mind interaction. So there is what is supposed to be here is some problem related to the sphere of mind that is somehow affecting even the musculoskeletal system in this case, but let's say the body part of ourselves. I wrote it down here in Greek, psyche and soma, which are body and mind. And I wrote it in Greek since we inherited this paradigm of body-mind from ancient Greek. This is the School of Athens from Raffaello Sanzio. And well, just a way to introduce a bit of philosophy behind all this concept. Here, there are all ancient Greek philosophers represented. I'm not going to talk about them all. Here we have Socrates, which is important for us and today just to set a threshold, because we have pre-Socratic and post-Socratic philosophers. And in the center, we have Plato and Aristotle. When we talk about pre-Socratic, here we have just a citation from Heraclitus, Pantarei. Everything is flowing, everything is changed. Mortals cannot experience twice the same experience. I think it's important to underline this because this is the way of thinking before Socrates. I'm summarizing in 2 slides some of the biggest achievement of philosophy of humankind. So I'm sorry if I'm there is some kind of understating, but I think it's important just to underline that with this mindset, you cannot develop science, since you cannot repeat an experiment. No? If this is the way of thinking, you cannot develop science as we have developed during the years. And the great change was coming after that. Once Plato here in the middle, pointing up to the sky, is pointing up to the sky with the idea that the only real truth is not in our body, is in our ideas. And our body is usually perceived as something negative that cannot allow us to really reach in the truth, because what we can see, what we can touch, what we can explore about the world is not the real world. It's just our perception of the world. So it is tightly related to our body. So there is the development of the theory of ideas with the concept that the truth, capital T truth, can only be in ideas. And so here really begins the body-mind dualism, which then was developed during the centuries. And here I just had a couple of slides trying to explain briefly why it reached us, because this was developed in Greece, but Greek people were not European. I mean, they were extremely xenophobic. They were Greek and they were barbarians. All the others were not, that were not Greek, were barbarians. Then, of course, they were included inside the Roman Empire, but still, Roman Empire was just part of Europe. And the heart of Europe was outside the empire. The point is that psyche in Greek does not mean mind. It means soul. And so, actually, is the body-soul dualism. And this became extremely interesting in religion. If you think about it, the Christian religion is an extremely strongly materialistic religion. So there is a God that becomes a man, which is generated, is not created, then die after a passion, then resurrecting body. So it's a strongly materialistic religion, but somehow around the 4th century, St. Augustine adopted Plato's dualism for another reason. That was not the reason developed by Plato, but it was important for St. Augustine to use it in order to create this, let's call it theory of salvation of the soul, which was not in the beginning of the Christian religion, but still was important for them, and through Christianism, to just spread through Europe and reached us. And along centuries, it actually allowed the development of science, because if I can split between what I am studying and what I am, then I can start the scientific method. And this was developed in Europe, not in Asia, for instance. In Asia, they didn't develop this kind of dualism. They had schools, they had philosophers, but they had different mindset. And it is important to underline that this dualism is a paradigm. I'm not talking about beliefs, clearly, no? Everybody is free to believe whatever he wants. The point is that it was a tool to reach a purpose. It was an instrument of study, but it is just one paradigm. There are other paradigms. And Asian philosophers developed other paradigms. It was they called the three treasures, Shen Qi Jing. So they believe that instead of having a body and the soul, every human being has these three elements, of which two can somehow be related to body and mind. The Shen is the personal spirit, awareness, mental health part. So it might be somehow related to the mind, while the Jin is the essence, the foundation of the body, so might be related to the body. The important point for us here is that in the Asian paradigm, there is a third element, which is called, generally translated as energy, but has a very strong link to breathe. And so the whole idea here was try to see if this other paradigm can be helpful to study the situation of this development of musculoskeletal disease. In medicine today, it is pretty clear that we cannot always divide body and mind, or body and soul. There are several physical pathologies that are driven by mental disorders. The example we are presenting today is the one of musculoskeletal problem driven by stress. Here we have an example of how during the last year, there is an exponential increase of papers that are talking about Tai Chi, for instance. So Tai Chi is a Chinese discipline that tries exactly to work on breathing in order to somehow drive posture and mental conditions. And so breathing, it is somehow the door to walk through in order to start see if there is this kind of the relationship, or better, if we can somehow measure this kind of relationship. Now, in our preliminary result, we started already with some kind of a problem, because it seems that the big portion of young population might not be able to perform abdominal breathing. We had a previous paper already published in which over 20 subjects, only 12 were actually capable of abdominal breathing when asked to breathe abdominally. And which is kind of a problem, since when we are talking about breathing techniques, we are talking mainly about abdominal breathing technique. We have seen how these already have an impact over the stability of the subject. People which is able to perform abdominal breathing present better stability. There are several indicators of stability that we will see even later that are all pointing in this direction. People able to perform abdominal breathe show better stability compared to the others. So there is already some kind of link between breathing capabilities and posture and stability. So in this project, the aim was to define this triangular link among posture, breathing, and level of stress, and try to see if it was possible to manage stress during stressor tasks. The whole study was divided in 2 sessions. In the first session, the students, the volunteers, were coming in the motion capture laboratory at the campus of Pompeu, and they had 4 recordings. First, we were just asking the subject to stand in the middle of the laboratory here, over the force plates, with open eyes looking at the wall. Then we repeat the acquisition with closed eyes. Then there were 10 minutes during which we were trying to do some breathing exercise, relaxation exercise, trying to explain the subject how to breathe abdominally, and then we repeat again the acquisition. The protocol we used were protocol for breathing and posture analysis. We placed about 100 markers over the whole body of the subject in order to being able first to measure which, not only how much they were breathing, so the volume of air that they were inhaling, but which compartment they were using. You can see here in blue the pulmonary rib cage, in green what is called the abdominal rib cage, and in orange the abdominal part. Then another set of markers was used to measure posture. We had physiological measure of stress. All the volunteers during this acquisition were wearing this galvanic skin resistance tool So we were able to measure how the conductivity of the skin was changing. Conductivity of the skin is supposed to be related to the level of stress. The higher the stress, the more micro sweat is increasing, and so the conductivity of the skin is also increasing. So the conductivity is supposed to be an indicator of the stress of the subject. They were also wearing another sensor in the ear, which was able to measure at the same time temperature, heart rate, and acceleration of the head, clearly. And all these measurements were taken over the force plate in the laboratory. So these force plates are measuring the displacement of the center of pressure. We are always swaying when we stand still. So we never stand still, we are always swaying. And this sway is an indicator of stability of the subject. The more you are moving, the less you are stable. The faster you are changing your movement, the less you are stable. Well, this was the first session. After the first session, the subjects were coming again for a second session in which we were trying to induce a stress situation. So the subjects were coming again. They had a welcome survey, 3 minutes of baseline measurement using again the same in-ear accelerometer sensor and the same galvanic skin recorder. But then we were asking them to give a presentation in front of professors, to perform a counting task in which they had to count backward from 1,000, 13 by 13, something that was supposed to create a kind of stress. And then there was a finally relaxing task, and at the end, the recovery and the breathing before they leave the laboratory. As I said, they were again, we were again measuring the galvanic skin resistance, the temperature, the heart rate, and the acceleration. And we were also asking the volunteer to fill surveys about their state of anxiety, their mindfulness, and their self-esteem situation. So results are presented in this kind of triangle because the idea was to see if we were able to identify some relation between these three actors. At the end, first of all, first result, the most difficult part was actually to obtain volunteers coming. So these first results are the best we get with 30 subjects. You will see that along the presentation, the number of subjects decreased because some recording is not working, some part of the protocol had to be changed. So this is the best we get with 20 male and 10 female. For a total of 120 acquisitions, because we had 4 acquisitions for subject. We have seen, theoretically, we wanted to compare between the first acquisition in which we were not specifying nothing, and the second one in which we were asking actually to breathe abdominally. But what we have seen is that there was no difference between the two. If a subject was able to breathe abdominally, he was already breathing abdominally from the beginning, and he was not actually changing because we asked them to change. So what we find out was that it was extremely, there was an extremely reduced number of subjects able to really perform abdominal breathing, and they were almost all male. And this was the first result. And so we also have different behaviors between male and female. So we decided to split the analysis in 2. Female, with such a small number of subjects able to perform abdominal breathing, we did not really perform a comparison between the ones that were able to abdominal breathe or not. But in male, we can see that it was possible to classify them based on stability measure. So only looking at stability measure, it was possible to discriminate if the subject was or not breathing abdominally with an accuracy of almost 85%, which for us was already good enough as a starting point. Here, since there were no difference between closed open eyes, there was no difference between different states, we took advantage of the situation and we were able to pull all together the acquisitions. And again, the direction is a direction of increased stability for subjects that are able to breathe abdominally. So we have some kind of direct relation between being able to breathe abdominally and stability of the subject. Here, I did not list all the parameters, but over 20 that were identified, 8 were significant, and they were all pointing in the direction of increased stability for the subjects that were able to abdominal breathe. Then we have in the same side of the triangle, between breathing and the body, we also have the analysis of posture. The number of subjects already decreased because we had to change the protocol at a certain point of the study. So we had only 20 subjects, 80 acquisition. Same situation, female were not able to breathe abdominally, and so we focused the analysis over male. But again, classification this time was perfect. So looking at posture, I'm talking about posture, I'm talking about articular angles, the position of the shoulder, the position of the hip. It was possible to perfectly discriminate between the people that was breathing abdominally and the people that was not. Now, if we try to understand what is this relation, things are becoming more difficult to understand. Significant parameters were the abduction of the knees, in which people that were breathing abdominally were more aligned. So you get this result here. And so this might suggest a better posture. But if we look at the hip, and this was true only for the right hip, people that was breathing abdominally had a bigger abduction of the hip that was then compensated by the bigger tilt of the pelvis that was then compensated again by the biggest tilt of the chest. So looking at the number like this, it doesn't really seem to suggest a better posture. We know it's a different posture. We still really have to understand what is happening here. And this is something that goes on for the whole study, because when we tried to look at linear regression, trying to relate posture with breathing, here we could study also the behavior of female. We are not classifying now between people who is able or not to breathe abdominally. We were just looking at the volumes of breathing and try to relate them with the articular angles. And you see that the regression can become quite high between the abdominal rib cage and different postural features. But between male and female, the postural features are completely different. And even when there is the same postural feature, which is one case, is the tilt of the shoulder, this movement, it becomes negative for male and positive for female. So we decided when we reached this part of the analysis that it was enough to understand that there is some kind of relation, and we definitely need more time and volunteers to understand what is this relation. But it becomes pretty clear that male and female are using different strategies, which we don't believe are related to biology. So we pass to this other side of the triangle, looking at the relation between stress and breathing. And again, here there is no classification between higher stress or lower stress, because luckily all the students were within acceptable level of stress. So there were no pathological situations. So we tried to analyze them linearly. Of course, the number of points is limited. We have 19 subjects split between male and female, so all results are just indicative. But here again, you can see how this is an indicator of anxiety, and this anxiety seems to decrease as soon as the percentage of the abdominal rib cage is increasing. The abdominal rib cage is the green part here. So it was not what we were looking for. Theoretically, it was supposed to be related to the orange part. It was supposed to be related to the abdominal breathing. But in female, it seems to be more related to the green part, so to the abdominal rib cage. Just to make things more complex, in male, the trend is completely opposite. And in male, we can see a trend which is closer to what we were expecting between the level of anxiety and the abdominal percentage, but only in male. This was not visible in female. On the other side, the relation between the self-esteem of the volunteers and again the level of the percentage of the rib cage, of the abdominal rib cage used, this was probably one of the best regression we have obtained, and it is true only for female. So the last side of the triangle, the relation between stress and stability. If we look at specific regression, distribution are poor. It doesn't really matter if the regression seems significant or not. But here there is a point just below the label that makes the regression a bit better, but still pretty poor. It is more interesting when you look at multiple regression. And the multiple regression, increasing the dimensionality just of 2 or 3, we reach very high level of description. And so, again, we can see that there is quite a good, an important relation between stability and the level of stress. In this case, is the level of self-esteem. But again, the predictors are different, and the constant applied are positive in one case and negative in the other. So the discussion is still very much open. Same side, stress and posture, same approach. So again, we had multiple linear regression. We had some kind of regression for female, which, as I said, no, the distribution is what it is, but there is some kind of relation between the level of stress, the level of, sorry, of anxiety, and shoulder tilt in this case. For male, we also have an interesting relation, but different predictors. Last part of the results about the time series data related to the level of galvanic skin resistance. Here we were analyzing the distribution over time. So we applied what is called a statistical parametric map that allowed to make a statistical analysis of a signal that changed during time. So it allows to study 1D continuum data. And what happened was that actually the level of galvanic skin resistance was statistically significantly different between subjects that were able to breathe abdominally and subjects that were able to breathe pulmonary. The bothering part is that subjects that were able to breathe abdominally show higher conductivity, so we're supposed to have higher stress level, which was exactly the opposite of what we were expecting. This was repeated also in the second session of analysis, in which we could perform a multifactorial ANOVA, because we could compare the different phases during which the students were doing different stressor tasks, and the factor of being or not able to breathe abdominally, and even the interaction between the two. But as you can see, there is no difference between the different phases. There is no interaction between the two factors, and the only factor that is again significant is the skin conductivity, which again is much higher in people that is able to breathe abdominally compared to people that is breathing pulmonary. At least for this, we found an explanation, because we find out that breathing relaxation stimulates parasympathetic nervous system activity via diaphragmatic stretch, and this raises the galvanic skin response. So this, at the end of the day, was quite an important result, because galvanic skin resistance is pretty much used to measure stress. And there is a bias here. which is strongly related to how people is breathing. Since breathing pattern is not something that you can change from 1 minute to another, as we have tried to do during the project and we did not succeed. If you compare a subject with himself in a reasonably close time, you can still use this kind of parameter. But if you are comparing different subjects, you must take into consideration that there might be this kind of bias. We also had all the measurement related to the in-ear sensor for accelerometer, temperature, and heart rate, but actually none of them was significant. The acceleration was only a significant factor in the different phases of the second session, but this was quite kind of given because there was a part in which they were sitting and there was a part in which they were standing and giving the presentation and they were moving. So it was pretty obvious to have this kind of different behavior, but there were no significant differences between people that were able to breathe abdominally and not. Temperature and heart rate do not show any significance in any combination. So to sum up, first result, majority of the subjects are not able to breathe with the diaphragm. And we could already close it here. In the meaning that if diaphragmatic breathing is the way to access this kind of therapeutic approach, then first people must learn to breathe diaphragmatically. This is quite an important point because from the little research I was able to do, all the mammals are able to breathe diaphragmatically and is the first way of breathing. So it's not clear why we lost this. And we are not neither able to understand why this is a major problem for female compared to male. This can be everything, even related to beauty canon. You know, having breathing with belt might be less pleasant for a lady and for a man. We don't know. Subjects that are able to breathe with the diaphragm tend to be more stable, less stressed, and have higher self-esteem. So this seems the nice part. But again, we were able to perform this kind of analysis only on a subset, only on male and only on part of them. The nice part related to all this job is that there is a relation between breathing and stability posture, between breathing and stress, between stress and stability and posture. Not only there is, which was kind of given. If there are disciplines that are trying to do it since thousands of years, so probably there is something. The point is that we are able to measure it. So we can study it. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for the attention. One of the points of this project was to develop material in order to present another project, which I tried to do presenting in ERC, which was not accepted. But we also wrote a project for the Spanish mainstream, which was not for a student. It was related to osteoarthritic subject, collaboration with Hospital del Mar, and this got accepted. And there is a part of the study that is strongly related to breathing and posture. And we also submitted the project to the National Geographic, which is founding project in this kind of alignment for planetary well-being. And we are still waiting for the evaluation. So we keep positive thinking and let's see.